Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset. Therefore, it must be Zeyde's Story Corner. That's right, Zeyde's Story Corner. Yeah, I was worried. Yeah, what were you worried about? Well, Donald was the only one in the chat room. Yeah, I was noticing that for right up until we started. Donald was the only one in there, and it kind of looked like he was going to be all by himself. So I was going, where is everybody? Yeah, I know. Yeah, what could be more important than being here? That's right. That's right. There's no baseball. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. There is no baseball, so where else would you want to be but here? So we are continuing to read the stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer. Wonderful stories. Yeah, they are absolutely wonderful stories. And we are coming to the end of the book, unfortunately. Yeah, they have been absolutely wonderful stories. And we are coming to the end of that. And I think two more shows. It kind of looks like, and we'll be done. Yeah, it's too bad. Yeah, we'll have to find those more stories. Well, funny you should say that. I just happened to get a new book of stories today. You did? Yes, I did. Almost 800 pages of stories. Really? That's right. Yeah, almost 800 pages of story. All of them they are all from the Sephardic diaspora. They are all Sephardic-based stories, and I just started reading it tonight, and I just got so pulled into the stories that I almost missed the time to start the show. But this sounds great. Yeah, it does sound great. I think people are going to enjoy it, and we have plenty of stories to last us for quite a while. That's good. Okay, so let's see what we have in the chat room. We have Donald, we have Richard, we have Veronica, and we have Marshall. Okay, so I guess we should probably get started on the stories. Yes, let's do that. Okay, so let me go ahead and put you on your camera. There I am. Okay, I am on my camera now. Okay, now we just need to get the stories. Okay, this is a very interesting story. It is called The Fearsome Inn. I don't know. This might be a two-parter. I guess we'll find out, won't we? Yeah, I guess we will. Yeah. Okay, so The Fearsome Inn. It was as if the snow treasuries of heaven had been opened. Kind of like the day. Yeah. Well, we did get a little bit of snow today, but I wouldn't say the treasuries of heaven opened. Yeah, but it was enough. Yeah, that's true. That is true. It was enough to make the road slick. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Now and then, it swirled in the air like a dog chasing his tail. All the roads were covered. The branches of the trees, glazed with ice, resembled the arms of crystal candelabras. In the middle of a field stood what was left of a scarecrow. It shook in the wind, flapping its rags and laughing madly, as scarecrows have been known to do. Okay. On a hill overgrown with thistles, by a windmill with a broken vane, and a smithy whose forge had been cold, stood the inn that belonged to the Bashova, the witch. She was the widow of the Bosch, the famous highwayman. For 40 years, the Bosch had preyed on the road of Poland, robbing merchants on the way to Warsaw, Krakow, Danzig, Leipzig, and had amassed a huge fortune. When he was finally caught and hanged, the Bashova married Le Petit, her present husband, who was half man, half devil. They settled in the inn and kept themselves busy plying their witchcraft on travelers who stumbled their way. The Bashova held captive 3 girls who were her servants. One was called Retzi, one Letzi, and the third Netzi. Retzi had black hair and black eyes. Letzi, blonde hair and blue eyes. And Netzi, red hair and green eyes. The girls slaved all day long. At night they slept in a hayloft with the rats and the field mice. Many times they tried to escape, but the Bashova and Le Petit had cast a spell on the road so that it led nowhere. Each time a girl tried to run away, she wandered around in circles and returned to the inn completely exhausted. When this happened, the Bashova soaked a reed whip in slops and to make it supple, Le Petit gave the girl 39 lashes. Anyway, in the summertime, wayfarers seldom came to the inn. But in the winter, when blizzards wiped out the roads, travelers often lost their way and victims were plentiful. Now, this particular morning, 3 young men had strayed to the inn. One was called Herschel. He was on his way on foot to the yeshiva in Lublin and had taken a wrong turn in the storm. The second, Velvel, had been traveling by sleigh to the city of Lemberg to buy merchandise for his father's store. He had fallen asleep and had slipped off the sleigh. The howling wind had prevented the coachman from hearing him call. Velvel wandered about looking for shelter and finally found himself at the Shova's inn. The third, Label, was returning home from a faraway city where he had been studying the Kabbalah, the ancient Hebrew books that revealed the mysteries of heaven and earth. As a parting gift, his master had given him a piece of chalk, saying, "If you draw a line around man or beast with this piece of chalk, it will imprison them in a circle. Not only will they be unable to escape, but no one will be able to get into the magic ring." But the chalk was of no help in a snowstorm, and Label, too, arrived at the inn. When the Chauve and Le Petit saw the three young guests, they were overjoyed. The Chauve looked like any other innkeeper, but like all witches, she had elf locks. Elf locks, we've heard that term a number of times. What is an elf lock? Well, an elf lock, if you've seen like a horse or a dog who has not been kept and his fur gets kind of long and twisted and matted, that is called an elf lock. So now you know. And knowing is half the battle. Are we going to do the rest of that? No, I don't think we need to. I think everybody gets the joke. Well, we'll see. Okay, anyway. She had an elf lock, which she kept well hidden under a cap. Le Petit had a stumpy horn on his forehead. However, he carefully combed his matted hair down to cover it. The three young men were wet through and frozen. The chauffeur led them to the stove so their clothes could dry out and gave orders to the girls to prepare the oven for baking. "You must be hungry," she said to the young men. "Be kind enough to wait just a bit. I always serve my guests hot rolls fresh from the oven." To Le Petit she said, "Go to the well and fetch water for the barrel so that our visitors can wash their hands and make the benediction before they meal." The three girls, Reze, Letze, and Netze, knew what was in store for the young men, but they dared not give even a word of warning. First of all, if Le Petit was to catch them, he would whip them to death. Secondly, they knew only too well that all roads led back to the inn. Everybody went to work at once. Reze added wood to the oven. Letze poured flour in a bowl and mixed some dough. Netze kneaded it and shaped it into rolls. The Bashova herself sprinkled the rolls with something that resembled caraway seed. Actually, it was an herb, the very smell of which, when baked, gave nightmares to those the Bashova wanted to ensnare. When the rolls were baked and about to be removed from the oven, the Bashova said to the young men, "You'll find 3 dippers and 3 towels by the barrel. Go wash your hands. The moment you are ready, the rolls will be taken out and they will be hot and crisp. You can smell them now." "You are a good housekeeper," Herschel said. "I wish I could find a wife like you," added Velvel. "If it brings good luck to treat wayfarers well," stated the label, the Calabalist. Each took hold of a dipper and bent over the barrel. In that very instant, the spicy smell of the herb-covered rolls took effect. All 3 young men suddenly felt dizzy and began to dream. Herschel dreamed that he was a slave in a strange land. He had become a trainer of wild animal beasts. His master, a prince, had ordered him to teach a huge lion called Aryeh. Mine is Ariel. Same difference. The Aryeh, the most dangerous of tricks. Herschel was to make the lion keep his jaws open while he placed his head in the beast's mouth. Then the animal was to close its jaws just enough so as not to harm Herschel, and release him on command. At last the trick was learned, and the day came when Herschel was to perform for the first time before the prince and his court. Herschel was in the lion's cage making one last test before the performance. He placed his head in the lion's mouth, patted him on the neck, and after a moment called, "Aryeh, enough!" But Aryeh did not loosen his jaws. Herschel patted him again and coaxed, "Aryeh, enough! Open your mouth!" But the lion did not move. Instead, he began to roar so terrifyingly that Herschel felt his blood freezing in his veins. The roaring continued louder and louder until Herschel could hardly breathe. "God save me," he prayed. This was Herschel's nightmare. Velvel also dreamed he was in a strange land. He knew no one. He looked for work but couldn't find any. Finally, he had to beg to eat. One late afternoon, he found himself on a street with many buildings. He walked through a gate into a courtyard. He turned to leave, but it had become dark, and he could not find his way. He called out, but no one heard him. Groping along a wall, he found an opening. He entered it, hoping it would bring him back into the street. Instead, a stairway led him downward. It got darker and darker. Suddenly he came to a large room. In the glow of a single oil lamp, he saw bricks of solid gold, barrels filled with coins. He had stumbled into the vault of the king's mint. Velvel knew that if he was discovered, he would be taken for a thief. He searched the room for an opening which to he had come. He soon found it, but at that moment, two workmen appeared and began to close it up with bricks. He crouched in the corner so they would not see him. Yet he knew he had to get out before their work was finished, or he would remain without bread and water, and perhaps even without air to breathe. Did he dare ask the workmen to let him out? They would believe that he was there to steal gold. They would summon the guards. He would be put in chains and thrown into the dungeon. They might torture him. Well, finally, he decided that it would be better to appeal for mercy of the workman than to be buried alive in the king's treasure. Just as he stepped from his corner, the last brick moved into place and the lamp flickered out. "Wait!" he shouted with all his might, but it was too late. That was Velvel's nightmare. Label dreamed he was in a desert. He was hungry and thirsty. After long searching, all he found was a dried-out stream in the middle of which lay snakes, crocodiles, and lizards. They looked as hungry and as parched as he. Their mouths were wide open, showing their pointy teeth. The trunk of a tree lay across the bed of the stream. On the other side, Label saw a grove of date palms surrounded by what looked like a shimmering pool. Label realized that one false step could land him among the monsters. But his thirst was so great that he was prepared to take the risk. He stepped onto the tree trunk, spread out his arms to help him keep his balance, and he made his way across. He had reached the middle of the stream when he saw coming toward him a woman whom he recognized immediately as a witch. Her head was covered with elf locks, and she had a webbed feet like a goose. Even though she did not resemble her, somehow she reminded him of the Vashova. Label stopped in his tracks. To fall into the hands of such a creature was even worse than being devoured by crocodiles. He turned carefully back to retrace his steps, only to see a male devil coming toward him. A short horn, which spun like a top, protruded from his forehead. Even though he did not resemble him, somehow he reminded Label of Le Petit. "O holy powers, what shall I do now?" cried Label in terror. This was Label's nightmare. At the same moment, all three, Herschel, Velvel, and Label, awoke. Their nightmares, which had seemed so long, in reality had lasted only a few seconds. All three still stood bent over the barrel as they heard the Shovas saying, "Well, why don't you wash your hands, my dear lads?" The girls were taking the rolls out of the oven. Dazed, all three washed their hands and wiped them. At last they were seated at the table. Herschel and Velvel were about to recite the benediction for bread and begin eating. Had they done this, they would have been lost, because in addition to the diabolic seeds, the Beshova had put a portion into the dough that deprived human beings of all will. But all at once Label cried out, "Wait!" "What's the matter?" asked Herschel. "Why?" added Velvel. "Eat, young man," the Beshova urged in a wheedling tone. "What is this?" Le Petit grumbled. "While getting the water, I lost my ring in the barrel," Label explained quickly. "It was a family heirloom that goes all the way back to King Solomon. It was given to him by the Queen of Sheba. It can show the way to buried riches, locate sunken ships and caravans covered by the sands of the desert. It can also heal the sick and make the old young. I beg you, help me find my ring. Despite many treasures that they already had, the greed of the Chauvet and La Petite could not be satisfied. Even more important, they had a great desire to be young again. When they heard what the ring could do, they both ran to the barrel, stuck in their hands into the water to search for it. Label jumped up, rushed over to the Chauvet and Le Petite, and quickly drew a circle around them with his chalk. When the two could find no ring in the barrel, they straightened up, ready to return to the table, but they could not step beyond the magic line surrounding them. "What's going on here?" growled Le Petite. "What's this circle?" screamed the Chauvet. Let's say, stood open-mouthed. Kind of like that. Herschel and Velvel sat without saying a word, as if they had lost their tongues in astonishment. This is what had happened. Just as Label was about to say the benediction, he glanced at the Chauvet, and it had suddenly struck him that she resembled the witch he had seen in his nightmare. He cast a quick look at Le Petite and recognized the devil in his dream. Label, who had studied the Kabbalah and knew something about the tricks of the evil host, realized that there was something wrong here and he must act immediately. He made up the story about the ring to prevent the other boys from eating. Held within the magic boundary, the Chauvet and Le Petite were captives for the first time in their lives. As soon as Letze, Retze, and Netze were convinced that the Chauvet and Le Petite had lost their power, they told the young men about all they had suffered under the wicked couple's spell. All three had parents, sisters, and brothers who had surely searched for them, but since the road to the inn was bewitched, their relatives had been unable to find them. As the girls related how they had been tricked away from their homes, the Chauvet shouted and waved her fist. She threatened to turn them all into hedgehogs, rats, and skunks. Le Petite shouted that he would whip them to death. Label assured the girls that they no longer had anything to fear. To prevent any devils from coming to the aid of their kin, Label made a chalk line along the inside of the entire house and around all the doors and windows. He also circled the oven and the table, but they could not step beyond the magic line surrounding them. Wrong page. The fireplace to make sure no evil spirit could get into the chimney. And that's where we're going to pause. We're going to take our break, and then when we return, we shall find out what's going to happen here. So, everybody, please stay tuned. We'll be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Okay. Let's find out what happens at this inn, shall we? Okay. As soon as it became clear that all these precautions were needed, no sooner did Dovshova and Lipetut discover that they were trapped, then they began to call on all the dark forces of the forest to come to their rescue. In no time, demons, devils, imps, sprites, and other impure spirits began to arrive. Some appeared as snakes with wings, others as huge bats, and still others looked like rams, weasels, and toads. Had Label not protected the house with his magic chalk, they would have swarmed in. Instead, they hovered around the windows, screeching and threatening those inside. There's no reason to fear them, Label again reassured the young people. They can do us no harm. It's time to prepare some food so that we can eat. Retse, and Letse set about making fresh dough with our portions of magic caraway seeds. They baked rolls, pretzels, and cookies and made a delicious meal. Retse was the best baker. Letse excelled in the roasting, and Netse could fry the crispest food. The good smells filled the house. The Shova and the Petut became exceedingly hungry and begged for food. But Label said, "We won't give you a bite unless you sign a pledge in your blood that you will leave the inn and return to the lower regions." This the Shove and Lipetut refused to do. Devils and witches can easily break a promise, but once they have signed in blood, they must keep their word or lose their powers forever. When the evil pair realized that they were getting nowhere with threats, they tried flattery. They called Label a master of Kabbalah. They complimented Herschel and Velvel and even had some nice things to say about the girls. They promised all kinds of gifts. Retse, Letse, and Netse were to get beautiful dresses, precious jewelry, and silk underclothing embroidered in gold. Lipetut swore he would teach the young man never heard of magic tricks. "We want neither your gifts nor your teachings," Label replied. For hours, the Shova and Lipetut alternated between curses and coaxing. The devils outside continued their racket, pressing against the windows. Inside, the young people knew they were safe, protected by the magic chalk. In winter, days passed quickly. Night brought new terrors and temptations. The evil ones laughed and cried, imitated the sounds of trumpets and horns, bleated and hopped about, blasphemed and boasted of their ungodly powers. Some of the creatures of darkness decided to tempt the young people by disguising themselves as beautiful girls, handsome noblemen. The night suddenly became day. The snow outside turned into a sunlit, flower-filled meadow, through which a blue stream flowed. A devil called Topiel, who we heard about from other stories, who specialized in luring humans into the water so that they would drown, sang one of his most enchanting melodies to get the young people out of the house. But Label would not let any of them succumb, explaining that it was all a delusion. When the black band saw that no one was coming out, they brought back the night. 3 black cats with eyes like green fire appeared in the window. Their meowing was like the ringing of bells. After a while, the cats, too, vanished. Instead, a whirling wind shook the roof and whistled in the chimney. There was a howling of wolves and a growling of bears. The outdoors turned fiery red, as if reflecting a great conflagration. It began thundering and lightning, and the inn swayed as in an earthquake. The young people could not help but be afraid. But they trusted Label and ate their supper while the demons raged. No matter how strong the devil is, Label said, God is stronger. Immediately after supper, the 3 girls undressed and went to sleep in the same large bed so that they would be less frightened. They put blindfolds on their eyes and cottons in their ears so they would not see the terrifying sights and not hear the mocking voices of the fiends. Harshel and Velvel made themselves a bed on top of the large brick oven. They were so exhausted that they soon fell into a deep sleep. Label stayed awake to keep watch. He knew that the Shova and Lapatut could not hold out much longer. He had a parchment scroll and a sharp quill pen in readiness. One by one, the monsters outside tried and departed, each for his own lair. The Shova and Lepatut were left alone. Label overheard the Vashova whispering to Lepatut, "We can't escape. We'll have to sign." "I wish I'd never known you," Lepatut snarled in reply. "If you won't sign now," Label called out, "I will go to bed, and you will have to stand on your feet until morning." "Oh, I can't stand another minute," the Vashova moaned. "I'm dying of hunger," Lepatut wailed. "I can't do without a smoke of mandrake root. If only you'd hand me my pipe." Sign the oath, and you will have all you need. The pair had no choice. They each pricked a wrist with the point of the quill and signed their oath in blood. I, the witch Dubashova, and I, the devil Lepetut, swear by Satan, Lilith, and by all the impure powers to leave this inn, never to return, neither we nor our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to the 10th generation. We leave all our possessions to our guest, Herschel, Velvel, and Label, and our one-time servants, Retze, Letze, and Netze. Furthermore, the treasure of the late highwayman Dobosh, hidden in the hollow of the old oak in the yard, is from now on and also to belong to the aforementioned parties. Furthermore, we remove all spells, charms, witchcraft, evil signs, and curses from the inn and its surroundings, and command that everything return to the state it was in before we came. Signed, Lepetut, the son of Beri, son of Shabari, son of Katagus, and back to my ancestor Satan. Dobashova, the daughter of Naamah, the daughter of Igrat, the daughter of Machlaat, and so on back to my grandmother Lilith the First. The haggling had continued for so long that the sky was beginning to turn gray with the light of dawn. The young people had awakened. They watched as Label erased a small section of circle around the Bashova and Lepetut, and another bit under a window. Then, opening the window, he called out in Aramaic, "Peek! Out!" The Bashova and Lepetit turned into shadows and vanished. Off they went to the desert of deserts, to the wastes of the nether-world, behind the mountain of darkness, where there is neither day nor night, and dusk is eternal. The girls were so happy they began to cry for joy. "Why cry?" Label said. "Your troubles are over. The road is open, and each of us can return home." But neither the boys nor the girls made a move to go. The truth is that the inn, which only a few moments before had looked so gloomy, was now cozy and pleasant. The snow shimmered in the sunlight. Ice spears hung from the roof, reflecting the colors of the rainbow. From the nearby woods came the sounds of winter birds chirping and trilling. The smell of pine filled the air. After breakfast, Label led the young people outside to a huge oak tree that was hundreds of years old. There was a great hollow in its trunk. At the back of the hollow they discovered chests full of gold and precious stones. The jewels lit up the darkness. When the girls saw the treasure, they began to scream with delight. But even with so many riches to take home, not one of them thought of leaving. The reason was that the greatest magic of all had begun to do its work among them. Of course, All three girls were filled with admiration and love for Label. Had he not driven away the Bashova and Lapetut and the other devils. However, they all knew that Label could marry only one of them, and Herschel and Velvel, too, were charming fellows. But who should marry whom? Again, they decided to trust Label's wisdom. And Label said, "Let each of us write down on a slip of paper the name of the one we love best and the one we love next best. Then we will study our choices, and we will know what to do." It turned out that each girl's first choice remained Label. But when it came to the second choice, Retze chose Herschel, and Letze chose Velvel. But Netze's second choice was the same as her first. It so happened that Herschel's first choice was Retze, and Velvel's Letze. As for Label, he too made only one choice, Netze. When the slips were read out, it was quite clear who should marry whom. At first, the girls thought the wedding should be postponed so that they could invite their parents and friends. But all three boys were eager to get married, and Label said, "We can arrange the wedding ceremonies right now and later make a big celebration and invite everyone." Since they had Dobosh's treasure, there was no lack of wedding rings. The girls found a large embroidered shawl that, with the aid of 4 sticks, made a beautiful, perfect bridal canopy. As there were 6 young people, 4 of them could hold up the canopy, while a pair stood beneath it for the ceremony. The first pair was Herschel and Retze. They were the oldest. Herschel, the bridegroom, placed the wedding band under Retze's finger and recited, "With this ring thou art consecrated to me according to the laws of Moshe in Israel." Bride and bridegroom both sipped wine from the same goblet, and the rest called out, "Mazel Tov!" Then, in turn, the other 2 couples stood beneath the canopy. And so they were married according to the strictest law of the Talmud. The brides had found the beautiful dresses in the Doshova's cupboards, and even though the clothes were long out of fashion, they looked splendid in them. Retze and Letze were a little envious of Netze because she had been chosen by Label, but they wished her luck with all their hearts just the same. And although Label had studied the Kabbalah and was generally better educated than the others, Herschel and Velvel were both taller and better looking. Besides, Herschel, the yeshiva student, was a scholar in his own way. As for Velvel, he was an excellent businessman and clever in practical matters. None of the girls had made a bad bargain. For the time being, all the couples remained at the inn. They sent word to their relatives and friends to tell them that they were safe and to invite them to a great wedding celebration. Because some of the guests had to come from distant places, The celebration was postponed until spring. Now that the inn was no longer spellbound, its entire surroundings had changed. The Toshova and Lepetut had thrown a curse on all the land for miles around. Suddenly streams, hills, and valleys appeared where there had been nothing but flat wasteland. Rabbits, deer, wild ducks, geese, pheasants, and other animals abounded where before there had been no living creatures. Winter passed. Spring came. The blue sky was blue and clear. The earth was richly covered with grass, flowers, and shrubbery. Trees that had seemed dead bore leaves and blossoms. Word had spread about the inn that, like a mirage, had for years appeared only to those unlucky enough to go astray. On the 33rd day after the first day of Pesach, this Lag BaOmer, the celebration took place. In addition to the guests, people came from all over the country to admire the changed inn and the three happy couples. Wedding jesters and musicians arrived from nearby towns to take part in the festivities. Magicians outdid each other to entertain the crowd with their tricks. After many entreaties, Label agreed to show his guests how the magic chalk had saved the young people. He fetched the liveliest rooster from the barn, stood him on the table, and drew a circle around him. No matter how strongly the rooster flapped his wings, he could not fly off the table until Label wiped away the chalk to free him. Everyone was amazed. They sang, danced, and made merry for 7 days and 7 nights. The moon was full and threw a silver light over the entire landscape. Even though there was not room enough in the inn for so many people, and many of the guests slept outdoors, no evil intruder dared to disturb or frighten anyone. After the last guest had left, it was time for Herschel and Velvel to go home to their wives, as had been decided. Label and Netze had made up their minds to remain in the inn, because, Label said, people often go astray, especially in the winter, and there should be someone to give them food and shelter. Label and Netze were determined never to take any money from their guests, since Dobosh's treasure had made them rich. The couple said goodbye to each other, and Label returned to his studies of the Holy Kabbalah, and the wisdom of which can never be learned in full. As the years went by, Herschel completed his education and became head of a yeshiva. He used his money to help poor students. Velvel became a great merchant and was renowned as a man of charity. All three couples lived happily and had many children and grandchildren. It became a custom each year for the couples and their children to gather at the inn and celebrate the day they had been set free. Since Label's rings with the power to make the old young had never existed, the Beshova and Lipetut lived out their allotted years and died. However, Other devils have taken their place. These still live somewhere far in the desert, in the underground city of Asmodeus, their king. It is said that Asmodeus has a beard that reaches to the ground and 2 huge horns on his head. He sits on a throne held up by 4 snakes instead of legs. He has many wives, but his favorite is still Lilith, who dances for him each night to the caterwauling of the devil's band. In time, the once fearsome inn became known as the greatest academy of Kabbalah. It is believed that the ancient Kabbalists could, with the power of holy words, create pigeons, sap wine from a well, and take 7-league steps. In his old age, Label was no longer called merely Label, but the saintly Reb Leib. His beard became white as silver. He could cure the sick with a touch, know what was happening in faraway cities, and foresee the future. Netze, even though she was busy with her grandchildren, most of whom had red hair and green eyes, helped her husband and copied his writings with a quill pen. The inn was a haven for all travelers who lost their way. It was said that no candle or oil lamps were needed there at night because angels, seraphim, and cherubim descended at dark and lit the inn with heavenly light. And that concludes our story for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope you will return tomorrow when it is the Rabbis Discuss with Rabbi A and Rabbi Ansel. And on Wednesday is the in-depth Torah study with Rabbi A and Rabbi Ansel again. Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern is Kabbalat and Ma'ariv Shabbat service, and Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. Eastern is Shakrit and Musaf. And then right back here on Monday for Zeyde's Story Corner. Until then, everyone, we will say Laila Tov.